I was born on July 2, 1967, in a modest home on Milwaukee's North Side, the middle child of two factory workers who drilled into me the value of hard work and simple faith. Each Sunday, my mother dressed me in a starched shirt and pressed slacks before we walked 3 blocks to St. Mark's Baptist Church, where my father served as an usher. I learned early that prayer could soothe hunger pangs as surely as a loaf of bread, and that hope did not hinge on circumstance but on the promise of something greater. My childhood intersected with Oprah Winfrey's during a rare community enrichment program at our elementary school. I still remember her warm smile in the crowded cafeteria, the way she listened as I described my dreams of preaching one day. Her kindness felt like sunlight breaking through overcast skies, unexpected and enlivening. Back then, neither of us imagined where life would carry us, but even then I sensed in her a compassion that reached beyond ordinary bounds. I carried that memory into adulthood. After college, I returned to Milwaukee to work as a youth counselor at my old church. I led singing groups, taught Bible verses, and spent sweltering summers running camps for kids who, like me, craved both nourishment and someone to believe in them. My faith deepened but also grew comfortable. I measured success in numbers, attendance, fundraising totals, the polished cadence of my sermons. On the night of June 10, 2025, around 2:13 a.m., everything changed. I sat at my mahogany desk, reviewing notes for a Sunday service, when a sharp pain exploded in my chest. My vision blurred, and the room tilted as if the walls had melted. I tried to reach for my phone, but my fingers flailed uselessly in the dim lamplight. The last sound I heard was the earnest hum of my desk fan before the world collapsed into a silence so complete it felt like the breath of eternity itself. In that void, I felt I was not merely dying but crossing a threshold, pulled toward an unseen realm that would shatter every certainty I had ever held. And in that moment, the memory of Oprah's smile flickered in my mind, anchoring me even as I slipped away. I opened my eyes to a furnace's roar. The air was thick with sulfur, each breath like inhaling molten metal. I stood at the edge of an endless corridor, its walls hewn from obsidian so dark it drank the feeble glow of distant flames. Beneath my feet, cracked stone slabs pulsed with burning embers, as if the earth itself were alive and bleeding. A haze of reddish smoke curled along the floor, drifting past charred pillars whose surfaces were scored with names and faces, souls eternally etched into this place of torment. I stumbled forward, every step announcing my presence with a crack and hiss as the embers beneath me flared to life. The corridor stretched farther than any building I had ever known, arched vaults soaring overhead until they dissolved into a void of black. From that void came echoes, the drumming of heavy chains, the muffled cries of agony, a distant chorus of lamentation that rose and fell like an ocean's tide. I pressed a trembling hand to the jagged wall, feeling its heat sear through my sleeve, and realized that even stone here was complicit in suffering. Turning a corner, I found a vast chamber dominated by a throne of smoldering iron. It sat atop a dais of fractured bone plates, and each step I took toward it felt like wading through a river of coals. Around the throne, skeletal figures clothed in tattered robes circled in a silent procession. Their hollow eye sockets glowed with a dull red light, yet their mouths moved in prayerful murmurs, an infernal parody of devotion. I recognized no faces, but their posture spoke of a servitude far darker than any earthly tyranny. To my left, an archway opened onto a garden of twisted flora, blackened vines draped over thorns dripping molten sap, flowers with petals like blades, their centers pulsing with faint luminescence. A sickly wind rustled through that garden, carrying whispers I could almost decipher, snatches of regret, fear, and unfulfilled longing. It was as if this realm had harvested every sorrow ever suffered, weaving them into a tapestry of despair. Farther along, a pool of crimson liquid gurgled beneath a vaulted ceiling. Steam rose from its surface, and from within emerged spectral hands reaching upward, claws grasping for escape. I shuddered, but the force that drew me onward would not be denied. Each vision pressed close, demanding my attention: a child's cradle rocking in a pool of fire, a throne room where monarchs knelt before a demon crowned in soot, a broken choir loft where shattered hymnals drifted on currents of heat. Yet even in this relentless nightmare, I felt the faintest pulse at my core, a distant echo of a promise I once believed in. It whispered that this place, for all its horror, was a mirror held to my own heart. And as terrified as I was, I understood that I had to keep moving, to face whatever awaited me beyond these burning halls. Only then could I learn the lesson this darkness had come to teach. I lurched forward, driven by a force I could neither name nor resist, and stepped off the cracked stone into a roiling torrent of soot-colored mist. The ground gave way beneath me, and I plummeted into a chasm of blistering air. My descent seemed to stretch into forever, each second a lifetime of panic as the heat intensified, scorching my lungs. Finally, I crashed onto jagged rock stained with a viscous, ember-red ichor. Pain should have ripped through me, but I felt only a hollow shock as I struggled to rise. Around me, the cavern yawned wide, its ceiling lost in a haze of flame-lit smoke. Figures emerged from the darkness like wraiths, souls bound in rusted chains, dragged along narrow catwalks that spanned molten fissures below. Their faces, gaunt and hollow, turned toward me, silent mouths agape in cries I could almost hear. I forced my legs to carry me forward, each step a battle against the scorching stones that licked at my worn shoes until they glowed like embers themselves. I passed scenes that churned my stomach. A circle of fallen angels, wings charred and torn, huddled around a pool of blackened water, their tears sizzling on contact. Beyond them, priests I had once admired, theologians whose words shaped congregations, gnawed at their own shattered halos, each fragment a testament to pride's collapse. My breath caught when I recognized one face, my old classmate Oprah, bound upright in a ring of twisted iron. Her once warm smile had faded, soot streaked her cheeks, and her hands were clamped by chains that glowed with a fiery pulse. Yet even in that torment, her eyes burned with fierce determination, as though she refused to be broken. I stumbled toward her, heart pounding. "Oprah!" I cried, but the heat swallowed my voice. She lifted her head, and in that moment our memories of gleaming studio lights and laughter slipped away, replaced by this infernal arena. She opened her mouth, as if to speak, but only a faint rasp escaped. Around us, the cavern trembled, and a surge of ember-like sparks shot upward, illuminating grotesque carvings on the walls, scenes of vanity, greed, and betrayal writ large in flames. Gripped by fear and pity, I reached out, but the chains rattled, and she was pulled backward by unseen hands. "I'm here," I whispered, voice cracking, though I wasn't sure she heard. The flicker of recognition in her eyes was gone, swallowed by anguish. A deep rumble rolled through the chamber, and I knew there was no turning back. The darkness pressed in, and somewhere beyond the veil of fire, I sensed that the true reckoning had yet to begin. I forced myself to stand as the cavern walls pulsed with a low, thunderous heartbeat. The choking haze parted just enough to reveal an expansive pit ringed by fractured stone benches carved from the bones of the earth itself. Shadows slithered along the walls like living graffiti, depicting every sin ever committed in every corner of the world. Each vignette was a grotesque tableau, a politician counting gold coins as orphans wailed, a celebrity striking a pose before an audience of empty-eyed mannequins, a preacher preaching love while trampling the weak. Every image burned itself into my mind. At the center of this abhorrent gallery stood two pillars of iron, massive posts set firmly into the obsidian floor, bound with chains as thick as my forearm. It was here they brought Oprah. I watched through tears of ash as she was dragged forward by skeletal figures whose hands ended in razor-sharp talons. Her once regal posture was bent beneath the weight of shackles. The golden glow of her hair was stained with soot, her iconic poise cracked by exhaustion. When they threw her into the space between the posts, the chain snapped into place around her wrists and ankles with a metallic clang that sounded like a verdict being passed. I staggered forward, lungs screaming for oxygen that did not exist, as the tribunal convened. Figures emerged from the darkness, twisted reflections of Hollywood's elite, actors with grinning skulls for faces, directors draped in blood-stained cloaks, agents whose eyes were voids filled with rabbits scurrying in endless hunger. They circled Oprah like vultures, whispering accusations in a language older than sin itself. I could almost discern their words: "You marketed pain, you sold illusion, you hid truth beneath glamour." She lifted her head, and our eyes met across that infernal arena. In her gaze I saw recognition flicker, an echo of the friend I knew. Then shame, anger, and sorrow washed over her features in waves. I tried to uplift, she cried out, voice ragged as if fractured glass, yet that cry was swallowed by the cavern's roaring silence. In that moment, I realized this was not just her trial but mine. I was condemned alongside her for every time I had chosen comfort over truth, spectacle over substance. The tribunal spoke as one, voices merging into a single, hollow intonation: "Confess your failures." Chains rattled as Oprah's head bowed. I choked back tears and found myself stepping into the circle, drawn by a force I could not resist. The ground beneath my feet trembled, and the ash at my ankles swelled upward into infantile faces crying out for mercy. I pressed my palms to my aching chest, as if to hold my heart in place, and spoke her name. "Oprah," I whispered. "I failed you. I joined the choir of false flattery instead of championing your truth." At my words, the tribunal's eyes fixed on me. Points of light glowed where their pupils should have been, as though my confession fed some unholy furnace. The skeletal crowds leaned in, coal dust tears trickling down their hollow cheeks. Oprah looked at me, her mouth opening in surprise, perhaps hope. Yet before she could speak, the skull-faced puppets raised bone-chilling claws toward her. I felt fury flare in my chest. "Stop!" I yelled, voice cracking like thunder. She bore burdens so we could dream. Her work gave hope. My words echoed, but the tribunal answered with derisive laughter that rattled my bones. Chains around Oprah's wrists began to glow with molten heat, burning through her sleeves and carving trails into her skin. She gasped, but her spirit did not break. Through the swirling ash, she fixed me with a look of fierce determination. "Remember who you are," she rasped. "Not what they made us become." The chains pulsed, and for a moment I felt that same feral light in her eyes that had once inspired millions. Then the ground shook violently, and fissures opened beneath the tribunal's feet, swallowing bones and ash alike. Light streamed down, brighter than any star, and the skeletal masses recoiled as though scorched by truth. The cavern's heartbeat grew louder, then stopped. Silence followed, heavy as judgment itself. Oprah's chains shattered, scattering molten fragments that cooled into jeweled tears on the obsidian floor. She stood unbound, every scar in her flesh now a testament to her endurance. The tribunal lay broken in their shadowed robes, their heads bowed as though penitent. Oprah extended a hand to me, and I took it, trembling. In that single touch, every regret I had ever harbored ignited into a fierce resolve. Even as the cavern threatened to collapse around us, I understood that confession had cracked hell's foundations. All hopes might have seemed lost, but genuine contrition had summoned a power older than sin. And in that crucible of judgment, a glimmer of redemption, the faintest light, began to grow. A sudden tremor rippled through the cavern, and in that moment the oppressive darkness recoiled. Above us, a fracture appeared in the smoky ceiling, a sliver of blinding white light that grew until it bathed the arena in pure radiance. The searing heat subsided as a gentle wind, cool and fragrant, swept through the pit. From that light stepped a figure whose presence silenced even the crackling embers. He wore robes of living light, edges trailing sparks of iridescence rather than flame. His feet touched the ground without scorching it. His eyes, deep wells of compassion, scanned the broken tribunal and fell upon Oprah and me. Instantly, every chain link clamped to her wrists and ankles dissolved into motes of glowing ash that drifted away on the breeze. My own heart felt as though a weight had lifted. The fear in my chest was replaced by a soft, insistent peace. He spoke, voice neither loud nor faint but resonant in every corner of my soul. Hollywood has traded truth for spectacle, vanity for virtue. Their stage has become a snare, and their applause a hollow echo. His words carved through the shadowed ruins like a sword of mercy. The broken forms of the tribunal stirred as if waking from a nightmare, skeletal fingers straightening, bowed heads lifting, hollow sockets reflecting in newfound clarity. He turned to Oprah, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Light spiraled outward from his touch, knitting scorched flesh and sealing the wounds left by iron and flame. "You, who have championed the downtrodden, must now stand as my witness," he continued, gaze shifting to me. "Tell the world what you have seen. Let your testimony be a lamp in the darkness, a call to repentance and renewal." In that moment, the pit beneath our feet ceased its tremors, and the echoing cries were stilled. Oprah drew a deep breath, as though tasting air for the first time since we arrived, and nodded. I felt tears, pure and unashamed, roll down my cheeks. The figure of light lifted his hand in blessing, and the cavern walls glowed with inscriptions of hope, replacing the old carvings of sin. Then, as swiftly as he had come, the light receded through the fissure above. The cavern returned to twilight, but the oppressive weight was gone. In its place lingered the clarity of purpose he had left behind, a divine mandate to confront Hollywood's sins and guide believers back to a faith that heals rather than harms. And with that, Oprah and I turned toward the dim exit, ready to carry his warning into the world of the living. I jolted awake to the antiseptic sting of hospital lights and the ceaseless beeping of a heart monitor. My chest ached where embers had burned through flesh, though in reality it was the CPR bruises and surgical bandages. Nurses bustled around me, calling out vitals, adjusting for lines. Yet none of that grounded me as much as the memories pulsing in my mind: Oprah's chained wrists, the tribunal's hollow jeers, Christ's voice demanding truth. Fear and shame warred within me. I recited familiar prayers, but the words tasted like ash, empty husks of what they once meant. Doubt slithered in: had I truly been serving God, or merely performing for applause? Guilt pressed so heavy I thought I'd collapse again. In the vigil's quiet moments, I heard Oprah's rasped whisper, "Remember who you are, not what they became." And Christ's command echoed, "Speak truth, heal wounds." Tears blurred my vision as I realized my faith needed rebirth. Rituals alone could not alter hearts. I had to live the confession I'd uttered in hell's pit. With trembling resolve, I vowed to rise not as the pastor I'd been, but as a broken man renewed by grace, determined to share the warning I'd been given, and to confront the sins of Hollywood with uncompromising honesty. Tuberku olduktan sonra, Kilisinin suk koridorlanda dua etmek yarine Hollywood un arka soka klanda uramai balam. Kameralan nda and uzak, vitrinladeki sadi gulisloren adendaki yuku dinledim. Bir zamanlar satisvaz vermek isen ydm katalerd simdi gerçek yasım hikayeleri dinliyordum. Rhisl oyunkulan gizli yanzel, paran golcasin kabolan gent umutlan sarasizliar. Saban erken saatlarinde, az seda izliyasil bazlayan nde anlatla, program balatım. Kamera karşısında dururken titriyen ellerimi ve hola yanan kalp gizlemedim. Her bolamd izliyasili, san klar almda değil, insanlands en aydınında yame öğrenint dedim. Hollywood yapm klarala yaz user gorismila ayalam, on lara, sorit tutkusunun si henam deki yanklanden sarkin die seslendim. Gisoljuanda, eski anang kitaplam yarain not deftruim gerche connectedla yazdam, grdm zinsola, tandem yazla, diduim slakla. Dua ediken ark sadus Allahi Muhammad estemiyordum, Cesaret istiyordum. Hollywood UN kalbind biadam kvlcm basletmak isen her kelamam veadmm bir savaz alanid. Bu yeni array, yanska ruhumu katamakla kalmayakak, islias alarami de kendi ic sehenam larini donistomai sarakakt. Since returning to the land of the living, every sunrise has felt like a second chance. I left behind the polished pulpit and stepped into smoky studios and backlot alleys, carrying the weight of hell's verdict like a burning lantern. My NDE testimony, raw, unfiltered, aired first on a small online channel. Viewers responded not with polite applause but with urgent messages. I've felt that emptiness, I'm rethinking my life, how do we change? I realize transformation begins not with spectacle but with community. I partnered with veteran actors, screenwriters, and crew members who confessed their own battles with excess and despair. Together, we launched Soul Check, a series of intimate gatherings where Hollywood insiders and faith leaders shared stories of failure and redemption. We held prayers under neon marquees, convened roundtables in rehearsal halls, and invited the public to witness both confession and healing. My own life shifted. I sold my home near the studio district and moved into a modest apartment above a church, trading comfort for compassion. Each week I lead open forums where anyone can speak their truth without fear of reprisal. I preach less from doctrine and more from what I saw, that even a world of glitz and glamour can cradle its own shadows, and only honest reckoning can dispel them. As I walk past the Walk of Fame at night, I no longer see stars alone but souls, each one a story, each burdened or redeemed by choices made behind the curtain. My new journey has one purpose, to shine hell's warning light onto Hollywood's stage, so that fame serves humanity rather than ensnares it. And with Oprah's spirit of compassion guiding me, I press on, ready to turn this divine judgment into a catalyst for lasting grace.